Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 4th of November. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and when you can't find what you need, please feel free to email me at david.snider@noaa.gov. I am happy to serve you any way I can, and I'd like to make sure that your community has the weather information that you need, whether that's something that you can put on your phone, something that you can look at from your PC or your computer device, or something that you can just easily access over the phone. And if you can't find what you need, please let me know. On the other side of that, I'd love to see pictures of your village and your community there. Take a picture of something pretty, some of the weather that's passing through, share it with us, and we can share it on the show and say, hey, this is what it looks like out in northwestern Alaska today. And in the coming days, you're expecting to see a little more snow across the region. We're looking at winter storm warnings across the northwest that will start up as we head into Monday. For the interior of the Seward Peninsula, we expect to see about 3 to 5 inches of snow in general, but the further inland you go, the better chance we're going to have of having higher snowfall amounts, and that could include areas a little bit further away from the coast that might reach upwards of 10 inches of snow. Along the coast, we expect to see amounts that are a little bit more mixed in with some rain, and in those cases, don't be surprised to find at least about 3 to 5 inches of snow along the coast, but in general, again, there could be some higher amounts that are working their way up toward that 10-inch amount. Now, as we are talking about the Kobuk and Noatak valleys here's the lower valley and the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, would expect to see as much as 10 inches of snow in some of those cases too, but there's going to be a big difference as we go ahead into Monday and then into Tuesday. We're expecting to see a little more wind across the lower end of the valley, but as you get closer toward Ambler, and generally northwest is where most of the snow is going to fall, areas out towards Shungnak probably aren't going to see quite as much wind and maybe not as much snow as well. Now, this area here probably looking at about 3 to 5 inches of snow in general, but northwest of Ambler, again, could see as much as 10 inches of snow, but significantly less wind the further east you go. So good news there, so a little less wind and less trouble with visibility as we go. There's probably going to be some coastal mixing again, so the further out toward the coast you get, the better chance you're going to have of seeing at least a little bit of some mixed precipitation there, and that's really going to be true around the Seward Peninsula region as well. Gusts, though, into the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys could reach upwards of 35 miles per hour, so there may be some visibility issues there for some of the lower parts of the valley. So the short story is, now that we've said all that, there's going to be snow. It's going to pile up, maybe 3 to 5 inches, and at most 10. And if you're closer to the coast, watch for rain to mix in with that. Let's take a look at the satellite picture from early this morning. You can see that the moving areas of the cloud cover here across the west is really cloud cover. Across most of the interior, in fact, as you watch this go through the motion again, a lot of this isn't moving. That's just cold air, and you can see how that infrared satellite picture is kind of erasing that as we go through the last 12 hours or so. Across southeast, you can see scattered areas of clouds, some of that a little bit thicker over the inland areas, and from about the capital city southward out toward Sitka, all the way down toward Craig, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, Heidelberg, you're all looking at rain today. But north of the capital city, just north in fact, from, let's say at Haines and Skagway and out toward Gustavus, it's been snow. So snow is falling in the region, just not around the Juneau area that we know of right now. As you look out west, several opportunities for unsettled weather are coming our way this week. Some of those forming out of the North Pacific as well. They'll creep into our weather picture, as you'll see here in just a few minutes. But our main concern, at least for the beginning of the week, is going to be that developing snow up across northwestern Alaska. And once that clears through, more of a northerly flow will return to the north coast as we get into the midweek. So here we go with our weather map planner. Low pressure sitting just south and west of Sitka at 995 millibars. With warm air sitting over the southern 2/3 of southeast, we're looking at rainfall right now. Just north of that, though, again, is that snow. For most of the interior, most of South Central, most of Southwest, we're looking at generally dry and clear conditions. Now, there is some areas of fog out across the west, some of that in the middle Yukon Valley down toward Cape Newenham. And up north, you can see where the clouds and the wind are coming together to create snow and blowing snow for most areas along the Beaufort Seacoast itself. That has been the case for a large part of today. Low pressure sitting just west of the Bering Strait and across the northeastern coast of Russia, 1,002 millibars here. Warmer air is following this and starting to build in as that gets organized and then taps into the weather system that is sitting across the Kamchatka Peninsula at 977 millibars. This is what's going to swing in as we get into Monday and create a little bit more of a push of wind and snow, of course. Now, you're thinking about the wind along the coastal areas, and right now it doesn't look like that's going to be a big concern as we get into Monday night and Tuesday. But one thing we will be watching there is kind of a 1-2 punch as this works through. On Monday, it looks like the first surge is going to develop and maybe bring coastal water up about 1 to 2 feet in some areas. Not a huge concern for most places there, but as we get into Tuesday, seas could come up just a little bit more. So we're going to keep a better eye on Tuesday for what's going on across our northwestern communities here. As we get through tonight, watch for showers across a large part of southeast. Just to the north again, Haines and Skagway, you're probably still looking at snow showers there. The low pressure sitting here. It's not a terribly strong system. It's just enough to kind of keep things stirred up. Up across the north, warmer air is now traveling north, squeezing that stronger wind off the coast, but it's still going to be with you for a while this evening. And then a very healthy south and westerly flow is found across the west coast. Periods of snow across the lower Yukon Valley, across the interior of the Seward Peninsula and the northwest, and right along the coast. Watch for that mixing of rain and snow, or maybe even some freezing rain at some times. Low pressure sittings out across the west. That's going to create some storm force winds over the open water. And as that front moves through, watch for that stronger southerly flow to really start to whip up. And that's going to create a little bit better chance of that wind there across the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys. Turning our gaze back towards southeast briefly, you'll notice some drier weather developing across northern parts of southeast. The rain and snow showers will be slow to leave, but they will leave on Monday, and that could leave you in a really good spot for Tuesday. So keep your eye on Tuesday if you're waiting for a patch of nice weather. Low pressure out across the Bering, sitting at 980 millibars. We'll get into more of a north and westerly flow for the Aleutians, and ahead of that, the winds start to pick up for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, but most areas in south central, Kodiak Island, the interior, still looking at generally severe, clear kind of weather there. As we get into Tuesday, high pressure shifting eastward. Notice the nice weather building into southeast. By Tuesday night into Wednesday, you'll be watching for this weather maker to start creeping in on your territory there, but it looks like for most of Tuesday, this should be out of the way. This has a potential of moving northward, though, as we get into Tuesday night and Wednesday, and then later in the week, another weather system's coming in. So we're going to keep our eyes on this low-pressure system in the Gulf, because this position right here on Tuesday probably isn't really locked into place just yet. So keep that question mark kind of mentality in mind when we're talking about Tuesday. Across the west, areas of snow across the western interior, across the Seward Peninsula. And again, a winter storm warning will be in effect there for the Kobuk and Noatak valleys as well. And at most, especially away from the coast, you could see as much as 10 inches of snow. Most places are probably talking about 3 to 5 inches. And remember, the wind will be a little bit more likely for the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys away from Ambler. The further east you go, the less wind you're going to have. So good news on that. Low pressure will be crossing over St. Lawrence Island around 996 millibars, so the winds and the seas are going to come up in here. And remember, Tuesdays when we're talking about watching for a better chance for some coastal surf conditions that might need a little more attention. So make sure you're paying attention to your weather radio and the Marine Band radio and the messages coming from the National Weather Service in Fairbanks. Let's take a look at temperatures now as we go through the next couple days. We'll start out your Monday morning with a pretty steep gradient with the coldest weather around Haines and Skagway out toward Yakutat in the 20s. And for southeast, it could be as warm as the lower 40s as you go down through the Clarence Strait and Ketchikan and Metlakatla. As you get into Prince William Sound, still looking at teens and 20s there, single digits perhaps as you get into places like Homer and Kenai and Anchorage. And the further north you go in the Susitna Valley, it doesn't get a whole lot better. In Fairbanks, you're looking at 3 to start your day tomorrow. 13 below around Eagle, 18 below in Northway, 19 below in Fort Yukon, and single digits to low teens for most of the northern coast. 32 around Nome, 20s for most of Southwest, and 30s and 40s for a large part of the Alaska Peninsula and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. High temperatures on Monday, really not much warmer there around Fort Yukon, 1 degree. 14 in Fairbanks, South Central 20s and 30s, Kodiak 44, mid-40s for most of the Aleutians. Southeast expect high temperatures back in the upper 30s to mid-40s. Around the north coast, low to mid-teens. From Barrow and westward in AKwx, you're looking at temps in the mid to upper 20s, maybe low to mid-30s around Point Hope and Point Lay, 36 around Shishmaref. Overnight lows for Tuesday morning. Pretty cold stuff with high pressure still in place, anywhere from 10 below to 20 below in many cases. The Middle Tanana Valley 4 below. South Central and the Cook Inlet region single digits and teens. 20s and 30s for Southeast. 32 in Kodiak. Bristol Bay temps at or just above freezing. Nunivak Island 35, 37 for Savunga, and about 34 in Nome with 11 around AKwx. And high temperatures on Tuesday, expecting to see single digits out east. South Central 20s and 30s. Much warmer weather for the west and southwest. Look at that, 30s and 40s there. Sandpoint, you're expecting 47 on Tuesday. Wainwright 32 and 30s and 40s for many in southeast. But let's take this out toward the next 8 to 14 days. The climate outlook has many parts of the Alaska region at above normal temperatures, at least a decent chance for that, especially across the midsections of the interior, parts of the west coast, and even for southeast, a chance that we'll have above normal weather. As far as precipitation goes, the entire region has a chance of seeing above normal precipitation, be that rain or snow. It looks like conditions are pointing toward kind of a wetter period as we move toward the end of mid-November. This would be a forecast ending November 19th.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation now, you'll notice most of the visibility and ceiling concerns will be across southern parts of southeast, out over the Bering and the Aleutians, and a little bit into the middle and upper Yukon as we go through your Monday morning. Starting out across South Central should be pretty good for visibility and ceilings, including Prince William Sound, but once you get down toward Kodiak Island, you'll notice a swath of IFR that's slowly creeping north and east throughout the day, with the next wave of weather coming up out of the North Pacific and southern Bering Sea. IFR will stretch all the way down the Chukchi coastline through the Seward Peninsula, especially around Nome and Norton Sound in the northern parts of the Yukon Delta, Makoriuk, and then after that, once you move southward, conditions should improve a little bit, but you'll have a patch of IFR that's fairly close to and surrounding the Bethel area, but otherwise MVFR through most of Bristol Bay. IFR will be working its way north and east toward Lake Iliamna through Dillingham and King Salmon throughout the day, as well as Kodiak Island. But improving conditions should be seen across southern parts of southeast as you get into Monday afternoon. IFR is expected to pass over Nikolsky and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor region as you move eastward and through the rest of the Monday afternoon time period. Once we get into Tuesday morning, look for IFR to pretty much stay along the west coast all the way from Kotzebue Sound through the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, down toward Nome, Unalakleet, all the way into the interior parts of south and west, but slow improvement is expected along coastal areas, while places like Bethel probably start out under IFR. Around Lake Iliamna, we expect to see at least some marginal weather there, but King Salmon and Dillingham out toward Kodiak Island, Raspberry Island, once again looking at IFR. South of, or north of that, I should say, still holding on to VFR through most of the Susitna Valley, Prince William Sound into the interior, with hit and miss VFR forming along areas near Fort Yukon down toward Eagle and probably pushing into Northway. Southeast looks pretty good. Hit and miss MVFR around Hyder. Once we get into the afternoon, that goes away. VFR expected for Tuesday afternoon, but look for worsening conditions across the west coast, especially into the interior and northward into the Brooks Range, with the Chukchi Coast holding an MVFR. Southwest seeing generally MVFR with hit and miss IFR from looks like Nome down toward just east of Hooper Bay, and then southward toward Bethel, and then south and west, all MVFR as you would expect through most of the Bering and most of the northern Gulf. Here's a look at the pass conditions now for Monday. We expect to see Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass holding at VFR conditions. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass looking at VFR. Rainy Pass will likely lean over toward MVFR as the day goes on, but Windy Pass holding at VFR conditions most of the day. Isabel Pass should be pretty good. Mentasta Pass looks to be okay. Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions there. Same goes for Portage Pass and Chilkoot and White Pass looking pretty much okay. Any conditions that we expect to see lower would be in southern and southeast. Freezing levels show that freezing area is pretty much all the way down across the southern coast for this time of the year. Pretty normal stuff there. 2,000 to 4,000 foot levels stretching out over the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, out over the Gulf, and then south of Sitka you can see levels coming up from 2 to about 4,000 feet. Kodiak Island holding at or above 4,000 feet for tomorrow morning as well. Icing potential is increasing across northern parts of the Seward Peninsula and off the Chukchi coast, wrapping into this broad area of low pressure with levels between about 3,000 and 5,000 feet for the northwest, above 6,000 feet for the central chain, and above 8,000 feet for parts of southeastern Alaska for at least isolated moderate icing potential. The jet stream has our broad area of low pressure holding over the western Bering Sea, the fastest push of air coming in around 95 to 100 knots or so, and then bending quickly to the north, so that southwesterly flow up the west coast, keeping things warm and unsettled in the west. A brief ridge of high pressure is trying to hold on across the eastern parts of Alaska. That is gradually going to give way to low pressure as we get through the week. In the meantime, southwesterly winds coming in across the west coast at 9,000 feet, 35 to 50 knots coming in across the Yukon Delta. High pressure sitting out across parts of western Yukon, with southwesterlies letting up a little bit across the north slope, and then more of a west and northwesterly flow setting up across the eastern Gulf, 25 to 30 knots there. You can see winds are a little bit lighter at 3,000 feet in this instance for southeastern Alaska, but our broad southwesterly flow still intact across the eastern Bering, 25 to 40 knots there with high pressure across the western Yukon, and our west and northwesterly flow across the Aleutians as strong as 20 to 40 knots for your daytime tomorrow. Turbulence then will focus on the north slope below 4,000 feet. Some chop here, isolated moderate at worst. Once you get south of the Brooks Range into Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, expect considerable moderate throughout the day, especially in the afternoon. St. Lawrence Island below 4,000 feet. Watch for isolated moderate chop across southwestern Alaska through the Cape Newenham in southwestern Capes region, around Haida Gwaii below 6,000 feet, and for the central and western chain below 4,000 feet, reaching considerable moderate. Stick around, we'll be back with the rest of your marine weather in just a moment.
There are some important things we can all do to avoid runway incursions. Things we probably all know, or have known but forgotten, or that we sometimes overlook because of distractions. Some of these things are simply plain old common sense. Always look, listen, and expect the unexpected. Minimize distractions by keeping a sterile cockpit while taxiing. Know where you are and where you're going. Never guess. Always know. And if you don't know or are uncertain, always ask. And that brings me to a word or two about the best ally we pilots have at Howard Airport, the air traffic controller.
Runway 25 left at Delta position and hold traffic on the Delta.
These are the professionals dedicated to leading us safely through the often complex and confusing runways and taxiways and traffic of a Howard Airport.
Cessna 60 Papa turning base at the 605 freeway, report turning final.
The pace of air traffic communications can be confusing, even overwhelming. We should not feel hesitant to ask controllers to repeat an instruction, to ask for progressive taxi instructions if we need them.
Narrow ground, Cherokee 32123, request progressive taxi instructions, please. November, Charlie, Bravo.
If you don't know, ask. If you aren't sure, verify.
When communicating with air traffic control, always listen before you transmit.
Cessna 3284 Delta, holding position, runway 19 right.
Also, listen to what the controller is saying to other aircraft. It can have a critical bearing on your safety. Again, maintaining situational awareness at all times is key. Be sure you understand all air traffic control instructions. If you receive a clearance you don't understand or is contrary to your position on the airport, you should verify the clearance.
Cessna 453 Sierra Papa. Runway 19er full length, cleared for takeoff.
Tower Tower, Cessna 453 Sierra Papa. Is at Bravo 3. Verify we're still cleared for takeoff.
Cessna 3 Sierra Papa. Negative, hold your position.
453 Sierra Papa. Holding short, runway 19 at Bravo 3.
Runway incursions occur most frequently when pilots enter or cross a runway without authorization. Typically, communication between the pilot and air traffic control is good. Pilots hear and read back hold short instructions and know what they're supposed to do.
Cessna 93018, hold short, runway 26 right.
But they cross hold short lines or taxi on the runway without authorization anyway. always read back all hold short instructions.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
A simple Roger won't do. This applies to position and hold and clearances to enter a runway as well.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
We can avoid most runway incursions by reducing distraction in the cockpit while taxiing, familiarizing ourselves with our departure and our destination airports, and staying alert at all times.
Be sure to write down taxi instructions, but never do it on the move. It can be a distraction. The same is true with checklists. Conduct them while stopped, never on the move. Pilots, controllers, and drivers all rely on their eyes as their primary sensors. And the simple fact is, our eyes don't work as well at night as they do during the day. The visual acuity we lose at night, combined with inconsistent cockpit lighting, canopy reflections, and possible rain, snow, or fog, make taxi, takeoff, and landing operations that seem easy during the day a real challenge at night. Pilots should observe a few simple lighting standards that will help those around them maintain their situational awareness. When taxiing into position and hold, turn on all exterior lights except landing lights. This will make your aircraft more conspicuous to other aircraft on final. Don't turn on your landing lights until you have been given clearance to take off. If you see an aircraft with its landing lights turned on, it's a clear signal that that aircraft is moving or is about to move down the runway for takeoff. When instructed to cross a runway, turn on all lights, including landing lights. The exception would be if your lights would interfere with someone holding or approaching from the other side of the runway. Also, when you line up for departure at night, consider lining up about 3 feet to the left or right of center line, so another pilot on final can more easily distinguish your aircraft from the runway lights.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time now for your marine update, and across the Beaufort Seacoast, the ice has been filling in pretty substantially there. We've got concentrations above 80%. Once you get north of Point Barrow, though, you can see that leading edge there doesn't have a whole lot of marginal ice. It's either 80% and higher or not there, except for along the coastline itself where protected areas are seeing new ice form. The same goes for the upper end of Kotzebue Sound, but with strong southerly winds that are warm and that are strong, it's precluding a whole lot of new ice from forming right now on top of sea surface temperatures that are certainly running on the warm side. This is today's update. For the very latest through the rest of the week, of course, you can check in at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Across the inside passage of southeast, winds will be coming up the further north you go, 25 to 40 knots out of the north with some stronger gusts in the Stevens Passage area, 40 knots. Across the outer coast, northwesterlies south of Sitka, 25 knots with 16-foot seas. Northeasterlies will be a little blustery at times. Look for some stronger gusts coming out of the north with 12-foot seas there on Monday. But for most areas across the outer coast on Tuesday, the weather gets really nice and the winds certainly diminish. Look for seas to hold around 6 to 8 feet. But across the inside passage, especially Stevens Passage northward, we expect to see some stronger winds there, and some of those could have some gusts with them around 45 knots or so, but Clarence Strait looks pretty good, 10 knots and 2-foot seas there on Tuesday. For South Central, generally light winds, 10 knots inside of Prince William Sound and 2-foot seas there, but stronger gusts coming out of the Copper River Delta, up to 35 knots there, 25 knots coming in from the southeast, as we still have an area of low pressure hovering close to shore. And then northerlies coming down through Cook Inlet, northwesterlies over the Barrens 20 to 25, 5 to 8-foot seas expected there. More of a broad easterly flow coming in across the northern Gulf, 15 to 20. Look for 4 to 5-foot seas there, 2-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, and 2 to 5-foot seas across Cook Inlet, 10 to as strong as 20 knots, the strongest of which, of course, down around the western Barrens on Tuesday. For the Bristol Bay region, look for southerlies inside, 4-foot sea expected there. Northwesterlies generally light on the eastern side of the Alaska Peninsula, 15 knots inside of Shelikof Strait, and 3-foot seas there. Northwesterlies a little stronger outside of Kodiak. And then southerlies down the Bering Sea coast, 10 to 20, With the higher seas, the further west you go, closer to that next wave. As we get into Tuesday, you can see winds start to shift a little bit down the Bering Sea coast, 15 knots there with 13-foot seas, 4 to 7-foot seas across the Pacific coast waters, 3-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait with an easterly flow, and generally light southerlies inside of Bristol Bay, but you can see higher seas and stronger winds out to the west, so let's take a look at those. Across the Aleutians on Monday now, you'll notice west and southwesterly winds for the central and eastern chain. Considerably stronger winds out across the western end, 35 to 40 with sustained seas holding at 18 to 23 feet. Storm force winds will be well to the north of your region, and watch for impacts there. That slides eastward on Tuesday. Here are the Pribilofs for point of reference. Westerlies generally across most of the chain, anywhere from 20 to 25. You're looking at 16 to 19-foot seas there across the Bering Sea coast, and about 6 to 11-foot seas across the Pacific coast. The worst of the winds in the seas will be well to your west and northwest. As we get into Monday, southerlies coming up the west coast now for Norton Sound, 6-foot seas there, 15-foot seas around St. Matthew, 13 for St. Paul and St. George. Everybody looking at sustained southerlies around 30 knots. As we get into Tuesday, we're going to watch the area around Norton Sound again. Remember, we were talking about some coastal issues there as we got into Monday. The first surge looks generally small, but as we get into Tuesday, we're talking about seas coming up to about 4 to 6 feet, and some of that again will be working its way into Norton Sound. Southerlies 30 knots there, 35 to 40 a little bit further south and west toward Nunivak Island, St. Paul and St. George, and 19 to 20-foot seas are expected. Southwesterlies also working their way toward the southwest coast. We'll be keeping an eye on that. As we get into Monday for the North Slope, we're looking at easterlies over the ice, 25 knots, south and southwesterlies coming out of the Bering Strait region, and a little more southeasterly inside of Kotzebue Sound, 30 knots with 8-foot seas there, so more of an offshore and out inlet flow. And southerlies coming up through the Bering Strait on Tuesday, 20 to 35 knots, looking for 9 to 13-foot seas in the open water there. Easterlies and southeasterlies over the Beaufort at 20 to 25. Let's recap your weather tonight. Things are pretty much showery across southeast, a little bit of snow in the north, generally rain for most parts of southeast south of Juneau. To the west, you can see a 971 millibar low across the western Bering Sea. That is going to be a storm force low as that moves eastward, but most of those impacts will stay well away from the coast. We are watching some of the stronger seas, though, building up and moving toward Norton Sound as we get toward Monday night and Tuesday. Winter storm warnings are posted for the northwest, for the interior of the Seward Peninsula and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. Some isolated amounts might reach upwards of 10 inches of snow. Coastal areas will see a little more rain mixing in, and we'll watch southeast with a nice day on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.